The morning sun carved long, golden rectangles across the polished concrete floor of the grindstone, a corner cafe in downtown San Diego, where the Pacific breeze carried the scent of salt and coffee through open windows. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the world moved at its usual, unhurried pace. The espresso machine hissed its rhythmic song. Ceramic mugs clinked against saucers. Conversations hummed like static, comfortable, forgettable, safe. At a small table by the window, 27-year-old Reese Kincaid sat with the kind of stillness that most people mistake for distraction. She was lean in the way that spoke of discipline rather than deprivation, her frame corded with muscle beneath a simple linen shirt and dark jeans. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her gray-blue eyes were fixed on the laptop screen in front of her, the cursor blinking over a half-finished email about quarterly sales projections for a software company she'd never cared about. To anyone watching, she looked like part of the scenery, just another young professional grinding through another ordinary morning, an easy target if you were looking for one. But Reese Kincaid was not ordinary. At 27, she had 63 confirmed kills across 4 deployments to places where the sand burned and the air tasted like cordite. She had spent 6 years as a Navy SEAL sniper, one of only a handful of women to ever complete the pipeline, and she had earned her place not through headlines or politics, but through cold, unshakable competence. She could put a round through a target's skull at 1,200 yards in a crosswind. She could go 3 days without sleep and still clear a building with surgical precision. She had done things in the dark that would haunt most people for the rest of their lives. And for the last 14 months, she had been trying desperately to forget all of it. Her gaze flicked up from the screen. It was a habit ingrained so deeply that it was as unconscious as breathing. Every 8 to 12 seconds, her eyes would sweep the room in a practiced arc, cataloging threats and anomalies. The barista with the new septum piercing, non-threat. The stressed mother wrestling a toddler into a high chair, non-threat. The 2 college students arguing over a textbook, headphones dangling, non-threat. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She needed to finish this email. She needed to be normal. Normal people didn't scan rooms for exits. Normal people didn't sleep with a Glock 19 under their pillow. Normal people didn't wake up at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, seeing the face of a 16-year-old boy holding an AK-47, his eyes wide with terror in the half-second before the rifle kicked against her shoulder and his head snapped back into the Afghan dust. Reese closed her eyes, breathed, opened them again. The cafe door swung open. 3 young men stepped inside, and Reese's attention locked onto them like a missile acquiring a target. They moved wrong, not the aimless shuffle of customers looking for caffeine, but with purpose, with coordination. The leader was tall and wiry, maybe 23, with sharp, intelligent features and eyes that were already scanning the room, not for safety, but for opportunity. His 2 companions were bigger, broader, built like linebackers. Brothers, maybe. They wore matching hoodies despite the 70-degree weather, hands shoved deep into their pockets. Reese's pulse didn't quicken. That was one of the things they drilled into you during selection. Your heart rate stays below 60 or you don't make it through Hell Week. But something ancient and animal in her hindbrain whispered a single word: predators. The 3 didn't approach the counter. The leader, Lucian Cross, though Reese didn't know his name yet, gave a subtle nod. The 2 brothers split off. One drifted toward the restrooms, creating a choke point in the narrow hallway. The other positioned himself near the door, phone in hand, eyes on the room. Textbook distraction team. Lucian began a slow circuit of the cafe, his gaze touching purses slung carelessly over chairbacks, phones left unattended on tables, laptops glowing with unlocked screens. He was hunting. Reese had seen this before, in a dozen cities across a dozen deployments. The predators cruise, looking for the weakest prey. His eyes settled on a corner table where an elderly man sat alone, his head nodding forward in the half-sleep of the aged. The man was 76 years old, though Reese didn't know that either. His name was Elwood Brennan, and he had spent 40 years working on classified nuclear projects, and his wife of 53 years had died 14 months ago. And every Tuesday he came to this cafe because she used to love their cinnamon rolls, and he couldn't quite break the habit. On the table beside his folded newspaper sat a worn leather wallet. Lucian's eyes moved on, swept across the room, landed on Reese. She was perfect. A woman alone, absorbed in her computer, a designer tote bag on the empty chair across from her, a newer model iPhone on the table, just inches from her elbow. She looked soft, distracted, unaware. Lucian had made 8 successful grabs in the last 3 months. He was good at reading people, at identifying the ones who wouldn't notice, wouldn't react, wouldn't fight. He had a system. His partners created the moment of chaos, and he moved in the eye of it, fast and clean, gone before anyone registered what had happened. He gave a barely perceptible signal. Time to move. The brother near the restrooms, Wyatt Maddox, 22 years old, 3 priors for petty theft, terrified of disappointing his older brother, lurched forward as if stumbling. He crashed into a passing waitress with theatrical violence. The young woman yelped. Her tray of empty cups exploded against the floor with a sharp, cymbal crash clatter that cut through the cafe's ambient hum like a gunshot. Heads turned. A ripple of surprise moved through the patrons, concerned murmurs, eyes on the accident. Lucian moved, 3 strides, silent, smooth, professional. His hand extended toward the strap of Reese's tote bag. He was fast, faster than most people could track. But Reese Kincaid was not most people. The instant the tray hit the floor, the part of her brain writing emails about quarterly projections went offline. The part that had kept her alive in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in a dozen nameless villages that smelled like sewage and fear, that part booted up in a microsecond. She didn't turn her head. Her peripheral vision, honed to a razor's edge through 6 years of combat, tracked Lucian's approach like a radar dish tracking an incoming missile. She saw his hand reach out, saw his fingers extend toward the leather strap. She had less than a second to react. She didn't scream, didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. She moved. It was a sequence so fluid, so economical, it looked choreographed. As Lucian's fingers brushed the leather, Reese's right hand shot out from her lap. Not a wild grab, but a surgical strike. Her hand clamped down on his wrist, thumb and fingers finding the radial nerve and the ulnar pressure point with the precision of a surgeon finding a vein. Pain exploded up Lucian's arm. His entire hand went numb. At the same instant, Reese used his momentum against him. A subtle twist of her torso, a pull that was more redirect than yank, and Lucian's center of gravity shifted violently forward. His body followed the trajectory she'd chosen for it. Before his brain could process what was happening, his face met the surface of her table with a meaty thud that rattled the ceramic sugar dispenser. His cheek pressed against a napkin. His eyes went wide with shock and pain. The entire sequence took 1.9 seconds. The cafe was still reacting to the dropped tray when Lucian found himself pinned, helpless, a low groan of confused agony escaping his lips. Reese didn't even look at him. Her eyes were already on his 2 companions. The message in her gaze was ice clear. Try it. Boone Maddox, the older brother, stood frozen near the door. His role had been simple. Watch, signal if cops showed, be ready to walk out casual if things went smooth. But things were not smooth. His little brother Wyatt was staring from the hallway, mouth slightly open, the waitress he'd accidentally bumped already forgotten. Boone took a hesitant step forward. He was 230 pounds of muscle, built on construction sites and high school football fields. He'd been in his share of fights. But something about the way this woman held his friend, the absolute calm in her posture, the complete absence of panic, made him pause. Reese finally looked down at Lucian. Her voice was low, conversational, utterly devoid of emotion. That was a bad decision. She released his wrist, but only to shift her grip. In one smooth motion, she hooked her foot around the leg of his chair and swept it out from under him. Lucian hit the floor with a thud that shook the nearby tables. Before he could even think about scrambling away, she was standing over him. She hadn't risen with any urgency. She had simply unfolded herself from the chair, and now she was there, a solid, immovable presence. She held out her hand, palm up. "The wallet," she said. Not a question, a command. Lucian stared up at her from the floor, his bravado evaporating like steam. "What? I don't have your—" He stopped. The look in her eyes wasn't anger. It was something far more terrifying. A flat, calm certainty. It was the look of someone who had seen human beings at their absolute worst and emerged not traumatized, but utterly unimpressed. It was the look of someone who had killed and who could kill again and who would lose no sleep either way. Lucian's hand trembled as he reached into his jacket. Behind Reese, Boone made his decision. Fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to save face in front of this suddenly silent cafe, he charged. 230 pounds of linebacker momentum, closing the distance fast. Reese didn't turn around. She sidestepped. A minimal movement, a shift of weight that opened up a gap the exact width of Boone's body. He blundered past her, off balance, committed to his trajectory. As he went by, she didn't punch him, didn't tackle him. She simply extended her arm and with an open palm gave him a perfectly timed shove in the small of his back. It was like redirecting a charging bull with a fingertip. Physics and timing did the rest. Boone crashed headlong into a vacant table. The impact sent the table skidding across the floor with a deafening screech of metal on concrete. It toppled over, taking Boone with it in a tangle of limbs and furniture. Wyatt, still standing by the restrooms, had seen enough. He turned and bolted for the door, nearly knocking over a customer who was just entering. He was gone, sprinting down the street like his life depended on it. The cafe was utterly silent. Every single person was staring. The barista stood frozen, milk steamer hissing unattended. The mother with the toddler had her phone out, recording. The college students had stopped arguing. Even the ambient music seemed to have quieted, though that was probably just perception. All eyes on the two men on the floor, Lucian groaning and clutching his wrist, Boone tangled in table legs, and the calm, composed woman standing in the center of it all. Lucian, still on the ground, fumbled in his jacket pocket. He produced not Reese's wallet, but his own. It fell from his trembling fingers and hit the floor with a slap of leather on concrete. But as it fell, 4 other items tumbled out with it. Driver's licenses, credit cards, a second wallet. Reese bent down and picked up the items. She didn't open any of them, just held them, her expression unreadable. By now the cafe manager was rushing over, his face pale, his phone already out. "I'm calling the police," he said, voice shaking. "I'm calling them right now." "Already done," someone called from across the room. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Lucian, seeing his window of escape closing, made one last desperate play. His hand shot toward a fallen metal napkin dispenser. Maybe thinking he could use it as a weapon, maybe just panicking, it didn't matter. Reese saw the movement. She didn't step back. She stepped forward, dropped into a low crouch beside him, her face inches from his. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that only he could hear it. "I spent 6 years in places where men like you would be a footnote," she said, "where your friends and your tough guy act wouldn't mean anything. I've had people try to kill me with rocks, with grenades, with rifles that could punch through walls. Do you really think a napkin dispenser is going to work?" Lucian froze, the dispenser half raised. He looked into her eyes, those flat, gray-blue pools, and for the first time in his 23 years, he understood what real fear felt like. Not the fear of getting caught, the primal fear of being in the presence of something far more dangerous than yourself. His hand opened. The dispenser clattered to the floor. "Smart," Reese said. She stood up, stepping back just as two San Diego PD patrol cars pulled up outside, light bars strobing red and blue across the cafe windows. Two officers strode in, hands on their duty belts, taking in the scene with the practiced efficiency of cops who'd seen it all. The lead officer was in his mid-40s, with graying hair at his temples, and the weathered look of someone who'd spent 20 years dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. His nameplate read Briggs. Detective Harlan Briggs had been a cop long enough to read a room in seconds. Two men on the floor, overturned table, scattered personal items, 30 witnesses with their phones out, and in the center of it all, a young woman who looked like she could be a yoga instructor, standing calm and collected as Sunday morning. But Briggs noticed things most people didn't. The way she stood, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. The way her eyes tracked him and his partner, marking them as friendlies but staying alert. The economical precision of her posture. And then he saw it. On the inside of her left wrist, partially hidden by a simple silver bracelet, a small, faded tattoo of a trident. Briggs's professional demeanor shifted, softened into something approaching respect. "Ma'am," he said, his tone careful, "can you tell me what happened here?" Before Reese could answer, a woman at a nearby table spoke up, her voice high with excitement. "She was amazing, officer. They tried to rob her and she just took them down like it was nothing. Barely even moved," another patron added. "It was like watching a magic trick." More voices chimed in, overlapping, eager. The crowd had found its narrative, and they were running with it. Hero woman stops robbery. Social media gold. Briggs held up a hand, quieting them. His gaze returned to Reese. He looked at the way she stood, at the calm in her eyes, at the trident on her wrist. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of military police he trained with, on the special operations guys who rotated through the precinct for joint exercises. "I'm guessing this isn't your first rodeo," he said quietly just to her. "The way you handled those two, that's not something you learn at a community center self-defense class." Reese met his eyes, didn't confirm, didn't deny, just waited. Briggs nodded slowly. "Navy?" he asked, his voice dropping even lower. "Was," Reese said. It was the first word she'd spoken to law enforcement. Briggs glanced at the trident tattoo again. Most SEALs didn't advertise. The fact that she had the ink meant she'd earned it, worn it with pride once. The fact that she said "was" in that flat tone meant something had changed. "How long?" he asked. 6 years, just out." "How long out?" 14 months. Briggs processed that. 27, maybe 28 years old. 6 years in meant she'd enlisted young, probably straight out of high school. 14 months out meant she'd left recently. And she'd left early. Most people did 20. Something had happened. But that wasn't his business. Not today. "Well," Briggs said, raising his voice to normal conversational volume, "I'm going to need you to stick around for a statement. My partner's going to talk to witnesses. And these two," he gestured at Lucian and Boone, who were now being helped to their feet by the other officer, "are going to have a conversation downtown." As the second officer began reading Miranda rights, Briggs picked up the items Lucian had dropped. 4 driver's licenses, 2 wallets, 3 credit cards. None of them matched Lucian's name. "Looks like you boys have been busy," Briggs muttered. Across the cafe, Elwood Brennan was stirring. The old man blinked, confused by the commotion, his hand instinctively going to his chest pocket. His wallet was still there. He looked around, trying to piece together what he'd missed during his brief doze. Briggs held up one of the recovered wallets, worn brown leather, creased from years of use. "Sir," he called over to Brennan, "is this yours?" Brennan squinted, slowly stood, his joints protesting. He shuffled over, and when Briggs handed him the wallet, the old man's hands began to shake. "Oh my God," Brennan whispered. He opened it with trembling fingers, and there, tucked behind his license, was a photograph. A woman in her early 70s, silver hair, bright eyes, a smile that radiated warmth even through the faded photo paper. Tears welled in Brennan's eyes. They took this? Looks like it, Briggs said gently. But someone got it back for you. Brennan looked around, spotted Reese standing by her table, and his vision blurred with tears. He shuffled toward her, the wallet clutched to his chest like a talisman. Miss, he said, his voice thick. Miss, I don't know how to thank you. Reese looked at the old man, at the tears tracking down his weathered cheeks, and for the first time since the incident began, her mask of calm composure cracked. Just for a second. Just long enough to reveal something human underneath. I'm glad it's safe, sir, she said quietly. Brennan opened the wallet again, gazed at the photograph. My wife, he said. Eleanor, she passed last year. 53 years we were married. This picture, it's from our anniversary, our 50th. It's all I have left of that day. He looked up at Reese, and his eyes held a weight of grief that she recognized. She'd seen it in mirrors for 14 months. You saved more than a wallet, young lady, Brennan said. You saved a memory, the only one I get to keep. Reese felt something crack open inside her chest, a place she'd been keeping carefully sealed. She reached out, touched the old man's arm gently. I understand loss, sir, she said. And she did, more than he could know. Around them, the cafe was slowly returning to normal. Briggs and his partner had Lucian and Boone in cuffs, were walking them toward the patrol cars. The manager was approaching with a tray, a fresh latte steaming in a to-go cup. Ma'am, the manager said, voice still shaky with adrenaline. This is on the house. For life if you want. That was incredible. Thank you. Reese accepted the coffee with a nod. The manager retreated. Briggs caught her eye, gestured that he'd be back in a few minutes for her statement. She nodded again. And then, for a brief moment, she was alone in the center of the room, and every eye was still on her. The quiet woman in the corner was no longer invisible. She was a hero, a guardian, a reminder that strength sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages. Reese hated it. She sat back down at her table. Her laptop was still open, the cursor still blinking over that half-finished email about quarterly projections. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. 78 notifications. The number was climbing. She looked around, saw at least a dozen phones pointed in her direction. People recording, streaming, uploading. She could see it already. The headlines, the videos. Mystery woman stops cafe robbery. Female warrior disarms 3 thieves. The tags, the shares, the comments. Her chest tightened. She needed to leave. Needed to get out before the reporters showed up, before someone recognized her, before her face was plastered across every social media platform and news outlet in the city. She gathered her things quickly, slipping her laptop into her bag. The manager tried to give her a business card. Please, come back anytime. Free coffee forever. But she just nodded vaguely and moved toward the door. Brennan caught her hand as she passed. Thank you, he said again. Truly. Take care of yourself, sir, Reese said. And then she was out the door, into the bright San Diego morning, leaving behind a cafe full of people who would be talking about what they'd witnessed for weeks. She walked 3 blocks before she felt like she could breathe again. Her apartment was a 20-minute walk, a small 1-bedroom in a building that had seen better days. She climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, stepped into the familiar dimness. The curtains were drawn. They were always drawn. She dropped her bag by the door, locked the deadbolt, the chain, the security bar she'd installed herself, checked the window locks, all habits from a life she was supposed to be leaving behind. Her phone was still buzzing. She pulled it out, saw the notifications had climbed to 217. She opened Instagram. The first video had been posted 9 minutes ago. Already had 43,000 views. The caption, Badass woman destroys thieves at coffee shop. Reese watched herself on the screen. Watched the takedown from an angle she hadn't seen. Watched Lucian's face hit the table. Watched Boone crash into the furniture. Watched herself stand there, calm as a statue. The comments were already piling up. Who is this woman? I need her to train me. Absolute legend. Queen energy. Somebody find out who she is. Reese's hand was shaking. She set the phone down on the kitchen counter and backed away from it like it was a live grenade. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid. Attention, questions, people digging into who she was, what she'd done, where she'd been. She moved to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up, she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. 27 years old. She looked older, felt older. The things she'd seen aged you in ways that had nothing to do with time. The flashbacks slammed into her. Afghanistan, the shot, the boy's face. Later didn't matter. Confirmed Taliban, IED materials found. She still saw his eyes every night. Reese gripped the edge of the sink, breathing hard. The bathroom tiles swam in her vision. You're not there, she whispered to herself. You're home. You're safe. You're out. But she didn't feel out. She felt like she was still in that scope, still pulling that trigger, still watching that boy fall. Her phone rang, the sound jarring, pulling her back. She walked to the counter, looked at the screen. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different number, voicemail, again. Again. The press, probably, or podcasters, or someone wanting an interview, a story, a piece of her. She powered the phone off. Silence flooded the apartment. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing. Then she moved to the small closet by the door, pushed aside winter coats she never wore in San Diego, and pulled out a locked case. She dialed the combination, her sister's birthday, because she could never forget that, and opened it. Inside was her Glock 19, loaded magazine beside it. She'd told herself when she got out that she'd sell it, that she didn't need it anymore, that normal people didn't sleep with loaded firearms within arm's reach. She'd been lying to herself. Reese took the gun out, checked it with automatic precision, press check, function check, sight alignment. Then she set it on the coffee table and sat on the couch, staring at it. 14 months. 14 months of therapy and medication, trying to rewire a brain trained for combat, trying to sleep through the night without seeing faces. And it had taken exactly one incident, 15 seconds in a coffee shop, to prove that she hadn't changed at all. She was still the weapon. Still the operator, still the woman who could take 3 men down without thinking, without hesitating, without even breaking stride. The warrior wasn't a phase she'd gone through. It was who she was. Her laptop was still in her bag. She pulled it out, opened it. That email about quarterly projections stared at her, cursor blinking. She read it over. It sounded like it had been written by a stranger. She deleted it, closed the laptop. That life, the office, the meetings, the pretending, wasn't going to work. She'd known it for months, but she'd been trying anyway because what else was there? A knock at the door made her head snap up. Her hand went to the Glock without thinking. Miss Kincaid? A man's voice, deep, authoritative. My name is Colonel Garrett Stonebridge. I'd like to talk to you. It's important. Reese's finger hovered over the trigger guard. She didn't recognize the name, didn't recognize the voice. How did you get my address? She called through the door. I have contacts, the voice replied. I know who you are, Miss Kincaid. I know what you've done, and I know what happened today. I was there. Reese moved to the door, looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, late 60s, maybe 70, tall, maybe 6'1", with military posture and silver hair cut high and tight. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt, no tie. His eyes were sharp, alert, and when he glanced up at the peephole, she saw something in them she recognized. The look of someone who'd seen combat, who'd survived it, who carried it. She kept the chain on but opened the door a crack. "I'm not interested in interviews." "I'm not a reporter," Stonebridge said. "I'm retired Army, Ranger Regiment. I was having coffee at the grindstone this morning, corner table, when those three came in. I watched the whole thing." Reese studied him through the gap. So? So, I know talent when I see it. That wasn't self-defense class muscle memory. That was operational training. SEAL training, if the tattoo on your wrist is any indication. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Stonebridge's voice was gentle but firm. "Ms. Kincaid, Reese, I'm not here to expose you or celebrate you or any of that nonsense. I'm here because something bigger is happening, and you're in the middle of it whether you like it or not." Reese's grip tightened on the Glock, still held low behind the door. "What are you talking about?" "Those three men, the thieves. They weren't after your purse. They were after something specific, from someone specific. And the people they work for don't like loose ends, especially loose ends that can put two of their operators in the hospital and make them look like amateurs on the internet." A chill ran down Reese's spine. "You're saying they'll come after me?" "I'm saying they already are." Silence stretched between them. Reese's tactical mind was already running scenarios, calculating threat levels, mapping escape routes. She'd been so focused on trying to be normal that she hadn't thought about the consequences, the exposure, the video going viral. Anyone looking for the thieves would now be looking for her too. "What do you want?" she asked. 5 minutes of your time," Stonebridge said. "That's all. 5 minutes to explain what you're walking into. And then you can tell me to leave, and I will." Reese weighed her options. She could shut the door, ignore him, pretend this conversation never happened. Or she could listen. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. Stonebridge stepped inside. His eyes swept the apartment in a single practiced glance. Exits, sightlines, defensive positions. She saw him catalog the locked case, the Glock on the table, the drawn curtains. His expression softened slightly. "PTSD?" he asked quietly. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who has it." He gestured to the couch. "May I?" Reese nodded. She stayed standing, the Glock now in her hand but pointed at the floor. Not a threat, just a statement. Stonebridge sat, his movements careful, respectful of her space. "I'll make this quick. The man you saved today, Elwood Brennan, he's not just some retired engineer. He worked on highly classified nuclear projects for 40 years. Submarine reactor designs, miniaturized systems, technology that's worth millions on the black market." Reese's blood went cold. The thieves were after him? Not directly. They were after a device he's been carrying. A prototype EMP system, small enough to fit in a briefcase. Or at least, they think he has it. Certain people believe it exists. Dangerous people. "Who?" Stonebridge leaned forward. "The man running those three thieves is named Nikolai Volkov, former Soviet Spetsnaz. Went private after the USSR collapsed. Now he's an arms dealer operating out of Tijuana, selling to whoever pays. Cartels, terrorists, foreign governments. He's wanted by every three-letter agency in the Western world. But he's smart, stays just across the border, never gets his hands dirty. Until today," Reese said slowly. "Until today. When you put two of his operators in the hospital and made him look like a fool in front of 2.8 million people and counting." Stonebridge's eyes met hers. "Volkov doesn't forgive embarrassment, and he doesn't leave witnesses." Reese felt the familiar weight of the mission settling onto her shoulders. The weight she'd been trying to shed for 14 months. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Stonebridge said. "I'm not here to recruit you or ask you to do anything. I'm here to warn you. You made an enemy today, Reese. A powerful one. And he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. The device. And silence. From you. From Brennan. from anyone who can connect him to this. Reese set the Glock on the coffee table, sat down across from Stonebridge. Why do you care? Why warn me? For the first time, something flickered in the old colonel's eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. Because 20 years ago, I had a daughter who looked a lot like you. She was a Marine, lieutenant, smart, capable, strong. His voice roughened. She died in Fallujah, 2004. She was 27 years old. Reese closed her eyes. 27, the same age she was now. I spent the last 20 years wishing I could have warned her, Stonebridge continued, wishing I could have prepared her better, trained her better, been there. He stood. I can't save my daughter, but maybe I can help someone else's daughter survive what's coming. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob. They'll come for you. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. Professional operators, not street thugs. You can handle yourself, that was clear today, but you can't do it alone. I work better alone, Reese said. It was true. Teams got you killed. Teams made you care, and caring was a liability. So did I, Stonebridge said, until I learned that lone wolves don't survive. They just die alone. He pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on the table by the door. My number. Call me if you need backup. Or don't. Your choice. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Reese sat in the silence, staring at the business card. Colonel Garrett Stonebridge, U.S. Army, retired. A phone number. Nothing else. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the apartment in shades of amber and shadow. She could hear the city beyond her windows. Traffic, voices, the ordinary sounds of ordinary people living ordinary lives. She wasn't ordinary. She never had been. And Stonebridge was right. They were coming. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Reese picked up her phone, powered it back on. 283 notifications now. She ignored them all and opened her contacts. Scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 6 months. Detective Harlan Briggs. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Kincaid, I was hoping you'd call. The thieves, she said without preamble. Where are they now? County lockup, booked on robbery, possession of stolen property. They'll be arraigned tomorrow. Has anyone posted bail? There was a pause. How did you know about that? Just tell me. Yeah, someone posted 500,000 cash about 2 hours ago. Anonymous. The judge is fighting it, but legally they're probably walking in the morning. Reese's jaw tightened. Detective, I need you to do me a favor. I'm listening. The old man, Elwood Brennan, is he in protective custody? Another pause. Should he be? Yes, Reese said. He should be, and so should I. Briggs's voice sharpened. What's going on, Miss Kincaid? What aren't you telling me? She looked at Stonebridge's card, at the Glock on her table, at the woman in the window's reflection, a warrior who'd been trying to pretend she was anything else. I'll explain everything, she said, but first I need to know, are you willing to trust a stranger? Depends on the stranger, Briggs said carefully, but I saw what you did today, and I know what that trident means. So yeah, I'm willing to listen. Good, Reese said, because we're about to have a very long night. She ended the call, stood, moved to her closet and pulled out items she'd packed away months ago, telling herself she'd never need them again. Tactical pants, boots, a trauma kit, night vision monocular, tools of a trade she tried to leave behind. Outside, night was falling over San Diego. Somewhere in the city, 3 thieves were preparing to walk free. Somewhere across the border, an arms dealer was making plans. And somewhere in the dark, operators were gearing up for a mission. Reese Kincaid had spent 14 months trying to be normal. That ended tonight. She loaded her gear into a duffel bag, checked her weapons, and walked out the door. The warrior was back. And this time, she wasn't running. The San Diego County Detention Facility smelled like disinfectant in desperation. Detective Harlan Briggs walked through the corridors with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent 20 years navigating these halls, nodding to guards, dodging trustees mopping floors. At 11:47 p.m., the jail was in its nocturnal rhythm. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional shout from a cell, the metallic clang of doors opening and closing. He stopped at interview room 3. Through the reinforced glass window, he could see Lucian Cross sitting at the bolted-down table, wrists cuffed to a chain looped through an eye bolt. The kid looked smaller now, his swagger from the cafe completely gone. His right wrist was swollen, already purpling where Reese had grabbed him. His face was pale. Briggs entered. Lucian's eyes flicked up, then away. Shame. Good. That meant he was thinking. "Your lawyer on the way?" Briggs asked, settling into the chair across from him. "Didn't call one," Lucian said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I don't want one." Lucian's voice was flat, defeated. "I want to talk to her." Briggs raised an eyebrow. "Her who?" "The woman, from the cafe, Reese Kincaid." Lucian looked up and there was something desperate in his eyes. "I need to talk to her, please." Briggs leaned back, studying him. In his 2 decades as a cop, he'd interviewed hundreds of suspects. He could read guilt, defiance, calculation, fear. What he saw in Lucian Cross right now was something different. Resignation. And underneath it, genuine terror. "You're facing federal charges, son. Multiple counts of robbery, possession of stolen property, conspiracy. You're looking at 8 to 12 years minimum, and you want to waste your one shot at cooperation talking to a civilian instead of cutting a deal with the DA? "I don't care about a deal," Lucian said. "I need to warn her. She's in danger. They all are. Mr. Brennan, you, everyone in that cafe." Briggs's instincts sharpened. This wasn't a play. The kid was genuinely scared. "Who's they?" Briggs asked. Lucian's hands trembled against the chain. "I'll only talk to her. That's the deal. Bring her here and I'll tell you everything. But she needs to hear it first." Briggs considered. Then he stood, knocked twice on the door. The guard opened it. "Give me 10 minutes, Briggs said. He walked back through the corridors, past the booking desk, out to the parking lot where Reese Kincaid stood beside his unmarked Crown Victoria, a duffel bag at her feet. She'd changed clothes since he'd last seen her. Tactical pants, dark jacket, boots built for running or fighting. Her hair was still in that severe ponytail, and her eyes tracked every movement in the parking lot. She looked like what she was, a weapon waiting to be pointed. "He wants to talk to you," Briggs said without preamble. "Specifically you. Won't say anything else until you're in the room." "Why me?" "That's what I intend to find out." Briggs gestured toward the building. "You coming?" Reese grabbed her duffel and followed him inside. Interview room 3 felt smaller with both of them in it. Lucian looked up as Reese entered, and something complicated crossed his face. Fear, yes, but also relief. And something that might have been respect. "Ms. Kincaid," he said, his voice cracked slightly. "Thank you for coming." Reese sat down across from him. She didn't speak, just waited. It was an interrogation technique she'd learned from her SEAL instructors. Silence made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people talked. Lucian swallowed. "I'm not a criminal. I mean, I am now, legally, but I didn't start out that way. I was a student, Stanford, engineering, full-ride scholarship." His eyes dropped to the table. "I had a future, and then my mom got sick. Stage 4 cancer. The treatments, the experimental drugs, none of it was covered by insurance. I was $200,000 in debt by my junior year, and she was dying anyway." Briggs shifted his weight but said nothing. Reese remained still. "That's when I met him," Lucian continued. "Nikolai Volkov. He approached me at a bar near campus, said he knew my situation, said he could help. All I had to do was a few simple jobs. Acquire some items for him. Nothing violent, just theft." "Theft of what?" Reese asked. Her voice was quiet but carried weight. "At first just money, wallets, purses, whatever. But then it escalated. He started giving me specific targets. People with access to technology, to classified information. He'd tell me exactly what to look for, where they'd be, when they'd be vulnerable. Lucian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 3 days ago, he gave me a new assignment. Elwood Brennan. Said Brennan carried a device, a prototype EMP system, small, portable, worth $50 million on the black market. Briggs straightened. Reese's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. Volkov wanted this device? She asked. Desperately. He had a buyer lined up, some terrorist cell operating out of Yemen. They were going to use it to take down infrastructure in major cities. Power grids, communications, chaos. Lucian looked up at her. I told him I couldn't do it, that stealing money was one thing, but helping terrorists was something else. He said if I didn't, my mother would have an accident in her hospice bed. He showed me pictures of her sleeping, proved he could get to her any time. The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. So I did the job, Lucian said, or tried to. Me and the Maddox brothers. We'd worked together before. Good guys, actually. Their sister has leukemia. Volkov had them over a barrel too, same way he had me. We were all just trying to save the people we loved. By helping a terrorist attack, Briggs said flatly. I know, Lucian's voice broke. I know what that makes me. But when you're watching your mother die because you can't afford morphine, when you're choosing between her pain and your conscience, the choice gets blurry. Reese leaned forward slightly. Why are you telling us this? Because I saw your face today, Lucian said, looking directly at her. When you saved Mr. Brennan's wallet, when you saw that picture of his wife, I saw something in you that I'd lost. You cared. You didn't have to care about some old man's photograph, but you did. And I realized I'd become the kind of person I used to hate. He took a shaky breath. I made the wrong choice. I know that now. But maybe I can make one right choice before it's too late. Volkov posted our bail. 500,000 cash. Anonymous donor, but it was him. We're supposed to walk out of here at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and when we do, he's going to have people waiting. Not to congratulate us, to tie up loose ends. He's going to kill you, Reese said. It wasn't a question. Us, yes, but also you, and Mr. Brennan, and anyone else who can connect him to this operation. Volkov doesn't leave witnesses. He's already sent a team to San Diego. 5 men, professional mercenaries, former military. They're going to hit you tonight. Briggs was already pulling out his phone. I need to get units to Brennan's address. And to yours, Miss Kincaid. They already know where I live, Reese said calmly. She looked at Lucian. This team, when are they moving? Lucian glanced at the wall clock. It read 11:58. Midnight. That's what the message said. Volkov sent it to Boone's phone before we got arrested. Midnight. Clean sweep. No survivors. Briggs was on his phone barking orders. This is Detective Briggs, badge 227. I need immediate protection detail for a witness at... He rattled off Brennan's address. Consider the threat active and imminent. Armed response authorized. As Briggs coordinated, Reese studied Lucian. The kid was 23 years old, scared, desperate, backed into a corner by circumstances and poor choices. She'd seen this before. Young men in over their heads, trying to do the right thing too late. The device, she said. Where is it now? I don't know, Lucian said. Mr. Brennan didn't have it on him at the cafe. We searched his usual spots, his car, his apartment, nothing. Either he's hidden it or it doesn't exist. Volkov thinks he destroyed it. That's why he's so furious. The pieces were falling into place. A phantom weapon, a desperate arms dealer, and a bunch of people in the crosshairs because they knew too much. I can help you, Lucian said suddenly. I know Volkov's operation, the compound where he works, the people he employs, the routes his shipments take. I can give you everything. In exchange for what? Briggs asked. phone still pressed to his ear. Protection for my mother, witness protection, and a chance to make this right. Briggs finished his call, looked at Reese. Patrol units are rolling to Brennan's place now. What about you? Where are you staying tonight? Not at my apartment, Reese said. She turned to Lucian. This team, how good are they? The best Volkov can afford. He uses former Spetsnaz mostly, Russian special forces. Guys who've been doing this since the Soviet days. They don't miss, they don't hesitate, and they don't stop until the job is done. Reese nodded slowly. She'd fought Spetsnaz-trained fighters before. Afghanistan, 2021. A Russian mercenary group embedded with Taliban forces. They were good, professional, ruthless, but so was she. I need to make a call, she said, standing. Briggs gestured to the door. Use my office, down the hall, second door on the left. Reese walked out, leaving Briggs with Lucian. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the business card Colonel Stonebridge had left. He answered on the first ring. Kincaid. You were right, she said without preamble. They're coming. Midnight. 5 operators. Spetsnaz trained. Where are you now? County detention. With Detective Briggs. We got intelligence from one of the thieves. Good. That means you're ahead of them. Where's Brennan? Police are securing him now. And you? Where will you be at midnight? Reese checked her watch. 12:03 a.m. I should be wherever they think I am. My apartment. There was a pause. You want to use yourself as bait. It's the fastest way to end this. They come for me. I take them down. We use them to get to Volkov. 5-on-1 odds, Stonebridge said. Even for a SEAL, that's aggressive. I've had worse. Another pause, then. I'm 15 minutes from your apartment. I'll be your overwatch. I work alone, Colonel. I know, so did I, once. Got me shot 3 times and decorated twice. His voice softened. Let me help, Reese. Not because you need it, because you deserve backup. Reese closed her eyes. Every instinct told her to say no. Teams meant complications. Teams meant caring. Teams meant watching people die. But Stonebridge was right. She'd be smarter with backup. 15 minutes, she said. Rear entrance. Don't be late. She hung up and returned to the interview room. Briggs was finishing paperwork, officially documenting Lucian's cooperation. Lucian looked up as she entered. Miss Kincaid, he said, I need you to know something. What I did today, trying to steal from you, it was the lowest point of my life. But when you stopped me, when you didn't hurt me more than you had to, when you saved Mr. Brennan's wallet, you showed me something I'd forgotten, that there are still people who fight for the right reasons. I'm not a hero, Reese said quietly. Maybe not, but you're better than I am. And if I can help you stop Volkov, maybe I can be a little better too. Reese met his eyes, saw genuine remorse there, genuine desire to make amends. You can help by staying alive, she said. Stay in protective custody. Don't trust anyone except Detective Briggs. And when this is over, you face whatever consequences come. But you face them knowing you did the right thing at the end. Lucian nodded. Yes, ma'am. Briggs stood, gathering his files. I'll keep him in isolation. No one in or out except me and the captain. Your turn, Miss Kincaid. What's your play? I'm going home, Reese said, and I'm going to be ready. 12:27 a.m. Reese stood in her apartment, every light off, curtains drawn. She'd changed into full tactical gear, black fatigues, plate carrier, knee pads. Her Glock 19 was holstered at her hip. A K-bar knife was strapped to her calf. She'd positioned improvised weapons throughout the apartment. A fire extinguisher by the door, a baseball bat in the bedroom, kitchen knives in strategic locations. She wasn't planning to use lethal force if she could avoid it, but she was planning to survive. Her phone buzzed. A text from Stonebridge. In position, rear fire escape, IR camera active. I count 5 heat signatures approaching from the north. ETA 2 minutes. Reese's pulse stayed steady at 58 beats per minute, the calm before action. She moved to the center of the living room, standing in the shadows, controlling her breathing. 1 minute. She heard it before she saw it, the subtle scrape of a lockpick in her front door. Professional, quiet, but she'd been listening for it. The door opened, no light spilled in. They disabled the hallway lights. Smart. The first operator came through low and fast, sweeping left. The second followed, sweeping right. They moved like water, fluid and coordinated. Spetsnaz training for sure. Reese didn't move, didn't breathe loud enough for them to hear. In the darkness, she was a shadow among shadows. The third operator entered, then the fourth. They were using hand signals now, military precision, clearing the apartment room by room. The fifth one stayed at the door, rear guard, also smart, but they'd made one critical mistake. They assumed she was hiding, waiting to be found. Reese had never been good at hiding. She moved. The first operator was 3 feet from her when she struck. Her hands shot out, grabbed his rifle barrel, twisted hard. The weapon came free from his grip as she used his own momentum to spin him into the wall. His helmet cracked against the drywall with a sickening thud. The second operator swung toward the sound, raising his weapon. Reese was already dropping low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the floor hard, and she followed him down, driving her knee into his solar plexus. The air exploded from his lungs. The third operator had night vision. She saw the green glow of his monocular as he acquired her position. He fired. The suppressed shot was barely louder than a cough, but the round punched through the space where her head had been a half-second earlier. Reese rolled, came up behind the couch, grabbed the fire extinguisher she'd placed there. She pulled the pin and sprayed a thick cloud of white chemical fog directly into his night vision. He stumbled back, temporarily blinded. The fourth operator was already on her. He was big, well over 200 pounds, and he came in with brutal efficiency. A Sistema-trained fighter using Russian martial arts. His strikes were economical, targeting nerve clusters and joints. Reese deflected, redirected, absorbed. He was good. Maybe better than her in pure hand-to-hand, but she wasn't fighting fair. She let him overcommit to a punch, stepped inside his guard, and drove her elbow up into his chin. His head snapped back, and she followed with a leg sweep that put him on the ground. Before he could recover, she grabbed the baseball bat from under the couch and brought it down on his knee. Not hard enough to shatter, but hard enough to make sure he wasn't getting up. The fifth operator, the rear guard, finally entered. He was the most dangerous, calm, patient, had watched his entire team go down in under 15 seconds. He didn't rush. He simply raised his pistol and fired 3 controlled shots at center mass. Reese's plate carrier absorbed 2. The third caught her in the shoulder, just above the protection. Pain blazed through her arm, hot and sharp. She dropped, rolled behind the kitchen counter as more shots punched through the cabinets above her head. Wood splinters rained down. Her shoulder was bleeding, not life-threatening, but enough to slow her down. She could feel the warm wetness spreading under her shirt. The operator advanced, methodical. He knew he'd hit her, knew she was wounded. He was taking his time now, making sure the next shot would count. Reese's hand found one of the kitchen knives she'd placed. 8-inch chef's knife, balanced, sharp. Not her preferred weapon, but it would do. She waited until his shadow fell across the kitchen entrance. Then she threw. The knife wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to distract. And it worked. The operator's eyes tracked the tumbling blade for a fraction of a second, his gun following. Reese was already moving. She came around the counter low and fast, inside his guard before he could reacquire. Her left hand grabbed his wrist, controlling the gun. Her right hand drove up in a palm strike to his nose. Cartilage crunched. He headbutted her. Stars exploded in her vision, but she held on, using his own weapon against him. They struggled, 2 professionals locked in close quarters combat, both knowing one mistake would be fatal. The gun went off between them. Once, twice. They both froze. The operator's eyes went wide. He looked down. 2 holes in his vest, center mass. The rounds had gone through at an angle, avoiding her plate carrier by inches. He collapsed. Reese stood over him, breathing hard, blood running down her arm. The apartment was silent except for the ragged breathing of the operators on the floor. Her phone buzzed. Stonebridge. Clear? I'm coming in. She texted back with her good hand. Clear. 5 down. I'm hit. 30 seconds later, Stonebridge was through the door, med kit in hand. He took in the scene with a single sweep. 5 operators down, Reese standing in the middle, blood soaking her shoulder. Jesus, Kincaid, he muttered, moving to her. When I said use yourself as bait, I didn't mean actually let them shoot you. Didn't let them, Reese said through gritted teeth. He got lucky. Stonebridge was already cutting away her shirt, examining the wound. Through and through. Clean. You'll live. But you need a hospital. No hospitals. Just patch it. Stubborn. You would know. Stonebridge allowed himself a small smile as he worked, cleaning the wound, applying combat gauze, pressure dressing. His hands were steady, practiced. He'd done this before, probably dozens of times. While he worked, Reese looked at the 5 operators on her floor. 2 unconscious, 2 groaning in pain, 1 dead, the one who'd shot her. She felt nothing looking at his body, no remorse, no satisfaction, just the cold, tactical assessment of threat eliminated. That was the problem with being a weapon. Weapons didn't feel. Briggs is on his way, Stonebridge said, securing the dressing with tape. He's bringing a tactical team. These 5 are going into federal custody. They won't talk, Reese said. Volkov pays well for silence. Maybe, but Lucian already gave us the location of Volkov's compound, and now we have physical evidence of an attempted hit. That's enough for the FBI to get involved. Enough to bring real pressure. Reese shook her head. FBI won't cross into Mexico. Volkov knows that. He'll disappear before they can coordinate with Mexican authorities. So what do you suggest? Reese looked at Stonebridge. We go get him, tonight, before he knows his team failed. That's a terrible idea, Stonebridge said, but there was a glint in his eyes that suggested he didn't entirely disagree. You have a better one? Yes, we wait for proper authorities. We do this legally. While Volkov executes Brennan, while he moves his operation somewhere we can't find him. Reese stood, testing her shoulder. It hurt like hell, but she could move, could fight. You were right this morning, Colonel. I'm a warrior. This is what I do. And right now, an innocent man is in danger because of something I did. You stopped a robbery. You saved him. I painted a target on his back. Mine too. The only way to remove that target is to eliminate the threat. Stonebridge studied her for a long moment. You're talking about crossing an international border, conducting an unauthorized military operation on foreign soil, assaulting a fortified compound. You know what that makes you? A criminal, Reese said flatly. No, it makes you a vigilante. And if you're caught, no one will save you. Not the Navy, not the government, no one. I know. Silence stretched between them. Outside, sirens were approaching. Briggs and his team coming to collect the evidence and the prisoners. Finally, Stonebridge spoke. My daughter, the one I told you about, she died because I wasn't there, because I was following orders, running ops by the book, while she was running into an ambush in Fallujah. His voice was rough with old pain. I've spent 20 years wondering if doing the right thing by the book was worth losing her. I'm sorry, Reese said quietly. Don't be sorry. Just don't make the same mistake I did. If you're going to do this, do it right. Do it smart. And do it with backup. Reese looked at him sharply. You're not serious. I'm 67 years old, Kincaid. I've got shrapnel in my leg from Grenada and arthritis in both knees. I can barely jog a mile without stopping, but I can still shoot straight, I can still read a tactical map, and I can still cover your six." He met her eyes. "You want to go after Volkov? Fine, but you're not going alone." "Colonel, that's not a request, that's the deal. You take me or you don't go." Reese wanted to argue, wanted to say she worked better alone, that she didn't need help, that she couldn't be responsible for another person's life. But looking at Stonebridge, she saw something she recognized. The same thing she'd seen in her own mirror for 14 months. A person trying to make peace with their past by protecting someone's future. "Fine," she said, "but we do it my way. Your way, with my advice. Deal." The sirens were loud now, right outside. Stonebridge moved to the window, looked out. "Briggs is here. Tactical team. EMTS. You're going to have to explain all this." "I'll tell them the truth. They came. I defended myself. Self-defense." "In the part where we're about to run an unsanctioned op in Mexico? That part we keep to ourselves." Stonebridge nodded. "Smart. When do we move?" Reese checked her watch. 1:17 a.m. 3 hours. Before dawn. We hit them while they're sleeping, extract Brennan, and get out before Volkov knows what happened. Aggressive timeline. It's the only timeline. Volkov will know his team failed as soon as the sun comes up. Maybe sooner. We need to move while we have surprise. There was a pounding on the door. "San Diego PD, open up!" Reese walked to the door, opened it. Briggs stood there with 6 tactical officers behind him, weapons drawn. His eyes swept the apartment, taking in the 5 operators on the floor, the blood, the damage. "Christ, Kincaid," he said, "you weren't kidding about the threat." "Self-defense," Reese said calmly. "They broke in, fired first. I responded with appropriate force." One of the tactical officers was checking the dead operator. "This one's gone. Single GSW to the chest. Looks like his own weapon." Briggs looked at Reese's shoulder. "You're hit. I'll live. You need a hospital. I need you to secure these 4 and get them talking. They work for Nikolai Volkov, same as Lucian Cross. This is connected to the Café robbery, to Brennan, to everything." Briggs's eyes sharpened. "Volkov, the arms dealer?" "The same. And if we don't move fast, he's going to disappear." "We? Kincaid, this is law enforcement business now. You're a civilian. A civilian who just stopped 5 trained killers from executing a hit. A civilian who has intel on Volkov's operation. A civilian who can help you close a case that's probably been on the FBI's board for years." Reese stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Or you can shut me out, follow protocol, and watch him slip away while you're coordinating with 3 different agencies and Mexican authorities who may or may not be on his payroll." Briggs's jaw worked. He knew she was right, knew that bureaucracy was the enemy of action. But he was also a cop. He had rules. "What are you proposing?" he asked carefully. "Let me help, officially, consultant, witness, whatever you need to call it, but let me help finish this." Briggs looked at Stonebridge, who'd been standing quietly in the background. "And you? Who are you?" "Colonel Garrett Stonebridge, U.S. Army retired. I was Miss Kincaid's commanding officer. I'm here in an advisory capacity." "Advisory?" Briggs's tone was skeptical. "That's right." Briggs looked between them. 2 operators, 2 warriors, both with that look in their eyes, the look that said they'd already made their decision, and nothing he said was going to change it. "I can't authorize civilian action," Briggs said slowly, "but I also can't stop you from providing information to law enforcement. If you happen to know where Volkov is, where Brennan might be, I'd be obligated to investigate." "He's in Mexico," Reese said, 15 miles south of the border. Compound in the hills outside Tijuana. Fortified. 12 guards minimum. Brennan's being held there as leverage." "How do you know this?" "Lucian Cross told me. He's been there. He knows the layout." Briggs pulled out his phone. started making calls. FBI, Border Patrol, Mexican Federal Police, the whole alphabet soup of agencies that would need to coordinate for a legal operation. While he talked, Stonebridge moved close to Reese. He's going to take 12 hours minimum to get approval for anything. By then, Volkov will be gone. I know. So we move on our own. Yes. You understand what you're risking? Your freedom, your future, everything. Reese looked at the dead operator on her floor, thought about the 16-year-old boy in Afghanistan, thought about Brennan and his wife's photograph, and the way he'd cried when he got it back. Some things were worth risking everything for. I understand, she said. Stonebridge nodded. Then let's gear up. We've got 3 hours to plan an operation that should take 3 weeks. I've done more with less. I know you have, but this time you're not alone. For the first time in 14 months, Reese felt something she'd almost forgotten. Not quite hope, not quite purpose, but something close. Something that felt like maybe, just maybe, she was doing the right thing for the right reasons. Briggs finished his calls, turned back to them. FBI says stand down. No cross-border operations without official authorization. Mexican authorities say they need 48 hours to verify intel. Border Patrol says it's not their jurisdiction. So we're on our own, Reese said. I didn't say that. Briggs met her eyes. I said the official channels are closed. But if a concerned citizen happened to provide me with real-time intelligence about a kidnapping in progress, I'd be obligated to investigate. And if that investigation led me across jurisdictional lines, well, I'm just following the evidence. You're offering to help, Reese said, surprised. I'm offering to look the other way while you do something stupid. But if you bring Brennan back alive, I'll make sure the paperwork reflects that you acted in defense of life. Clear? Crystal. Briggs handed her a business card. On the back, he'd written a phone number. That's my personal cell. You call me the second you have Brennan. I'll have an extraction team ready at the border. But Kincaid, his expression hardened. You bring him back alive. Because if you don't, I can't protect you from what comes after. Understood. Briggs nodded, then turned to his team. Let's process this scene. I want statements from Ms. Kincaid and the Colonel, and get these 4 into interrogation. One of them is going to talk. As the tactical team began documenting the scene, photographing the operators, collecting evidence, Reese and Stonebridge moved to the bedroom. She pulled out her duffel bag, started loading gear. We need a vehicle, Stonebridge said. Something that won't draw attention crossing the border. I know a guy, Reese said. Former SEAL, runs a security company. He owes me. Weapons? I've got my Glock in the K-bar. You? Stonebridge opened his jacket, revealed a worn M1911 in a shoulder holster. Same sidearm I carried in Grenada, never fails. We're going to need more than pistols if there are 12 guards. Then we don't fight 12 guards. We use stealth. We extract Brennan and we get out before they know we're there. And if stealth fails? Stonebridge smiled grimly. Then we improvise, like we always do. Reese finished packing, checked her shoulder. The bleeding had stopped, but it was going to limit her mobility. She'd have to compensate, fight smarter rather than harder. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Reese, it's Lucian. Briggs let me send this. I remembered something. Volkov keeps Brennan in the basement level, east corner room. 2 guards outside, 1 inside. Window faces north, barred but breakable. Alarm system is old, hardwired, can be cut. Main power junction is in the garage. Good luck, and thank you. Reese showed the text to Stonebridge. We have a floor plan. From a scared kid who's never run an operation. You trust it? I trust that he wants to help. And right now it's more than we had 5 minutes ago. Stonebridge nodded. Then let's move. Clock's ticking, and Brennan's running out of time. They walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the crime scene, the operators, the evidence of a fight Reese had won but hadn't wanted. Outside, San Diego was dark and quiet. the city sleeping while she prepared for war. At 3:47 a.m., Reese and Stonebridge crossed the border into Mexico in a nondescript Ford Explorer, borrowed from Reese's former SEAL teammate. They had fake IDs, tourist covers, and enough weapons hidden in the vehicle's smuggling compartments to fight a small war. The border guards barely looked at them, just another couple of Americans heading south for vacation. 15 miles into Mexico, the paved roads gave way to dirt. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the dark silhouettes of hills against a star-filled sky. Somewhere ahead, in a compound hidden in those hills, an old man waited, scared, alone, praying someone would come. Reese Kincaid was coming, and she wasn't planning to leave without him. The compound sat like a scar on the hillside, 3 miles south of the last paved road. Reese watched it through military-grade binoculars from a ridge 800 meters away, her wounded shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat. Dawn was still 2 hours off, the world suspended in that deep darkness before the first hint of gray touches the eastern sky. Beside her, Colonel Stonebridge sketched the layout on a notepad, using a red-lensed penlight, his handwriting surprisingly neat for a man who'd spent 40 years in combat zones. 2-story main building, garage attached to the west side, guard tower on the southeast corner, currently unmanned. 6 visible sentries patrolling in pairs. Perimeter fence, chain link, maybe 8 feet high. No razor wire, which was either arrogance or stupidity, probably both. "Count again," Stonebridge whispered. "I want to make sure." Reese swept the binoculars across the compound one more time, methodical, patient. 2 guards at the main gate, 2 more walking the north perimeter, 1 on the roof, smoking, 1 in what looked like a command center on the ground floor, visible through a window, the blue glow of monitors illuminating his face. 6 active, she confirmed, but Lucian said 12 total. That means 6 are either inside or sleeping. Shift change is probably 0600. We hit them at 0530, catch them tired, waiting for relief. That's 90 minutes from now. You got somewhere better to be? Reese allowed herself a small smile. Stonebridge's dry humor reminded her of her first platoon chief, a grizzled SEAL who'd survived Mogadishu and taught her that the ability to crack jokes under pressure was the difference between operators who lasted and operators who broke. They'd been in position for 40 minutes, watching, learning the patterns. The guards were professional, but complacent. They followed their routes with clockwork precision, which meant they'd been doing this a while without incident. Stonebridge noticed immediately. How bad, he asked. Manageable. That's not what I asked. It's a through and through, clean. I've had worse. I don't doubt it, but worse doesn't mean good. You're at maybe 70% mobility in that arm. If this goes kinetic, you're fighting one-handed. Then we make sure it doesn't go kinetic. Reese lowered the binoculars. Stealth insertion. Get to the basement. Extract Brennan. Out before they know we're here. And if we're compromised, then we adapt. Stonebridge grunted approval. All right, Kincaid. You're the operator. This is your show. I'm just the old man providing fire support. You're not that old. I'm 67. I've got orthopedic insoles and I take blood pressure medication. Trust me, I'm that old. But there was a glint in his eyes that said age was just a number, and experience was worth more than youth. They settled into wait, the silence between them comfortable. Reese had spent countless hours like this in Afghanistan and Iraq, waiting for the moment when stillness erupted into controlled violence. She'd learned to compartmentalize, to separate the part of herself that felt from the part that acted. At 0500, the guard on the roof flicked his cigarette over the edge and disappeared down a stairwell. Shift change prep. Right on schedule. Movement, Stonebridge whispered, tracking the northern perimeter guards. They'd stopped their patrol, were heading toward the main building. Coffee break, maybe, or just tired. Perfect. At 0512, Reese and Stonebridge moved. They came down from the ridge in a low crouch, weapons drawn, using the natural terrain for cover. The distance from the ridge to the fence was 200 meters of open ground, but they'd chosen their approach carefully. A shallow ravine that ran parallel to the compound, deep enough to hide their silhouettes against the lightning sky. The fence was exactly where the reconnaissance had shown it. Chain link, 8 feet, no sensors. Stonebridge produced wire cutters from his pack, began working on the bottom edge. The metal whispered as it parted, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet. 30 seconds later, they had a gap big enough to slip through. Inside the perimeter now. Enemy territory. Reese's training took over completely, her mind clicking into the cold clarity of tactical space. Threat assessment, cover positions, lines of fire, exit routes. Everything became geometry and probability. They moved along the wall of the garage, staying in shadow. The power junction was exactly where Lucian had said, a gray metal box on the exterior wall, secured with a padlock that Stonebridge picked in under 10 seconds. Inside the box, the main breaker. Reese's hand hovered over it. Once we throw this, we've got maybe 3 minutes before someone comes to check, Stonebridge whispered. 4 if we're lucky. Then we better move fast. She threw the breaker. The compound went dark. Not completely. Emergency lighting kicked in almost immediately. Battery-powered units that cast a dim, red glow over the main pathways. But it was enough. The sudden darkness would disorient, would make the guards assume equipment failure rather than intrusion. They had their window. Reese moved toward the north side of the building, where Lucian had said the basement window was located. She found it quickly, a narrow opening maybe 3 feet wide, with iron bars set into the concrete. The bars were old, rusted at the anchor points. She pulled on them. They shifted slightly but held. Stonebridge produced a small pry bar from his pack, wedged it behind one of the bars, and levered with controlled force. The concrete around the anchor crumbled. The bar came free with a muted scrape of metal on stone. 2 more bars. 30 seconds of work. The window was open. Reese went through first, dropping into darkness, landing in a crouch on concrete floor. The basement smelled like mildew and old tobacco. Her eyes adjusted quickly, SEALs trained extensively for night operations, learning to see in conditions that would blind most people. The room was storage, boxes, old furniture, dusty equipment, and in the far corner, a door with light bleeding under the crack. Stonebridge dropped through the window behind her, moving with surprising grace for a man his age. He covered the door while Reese approached, listening. Voices on the other side. 2 men, Spanish, casual conversation, not alert. The guards Lucian had mentioned. And beneath their voices another sound. An older man, breathing heavily, scared. Brennan. Reese held up 2 fingers to Stonebridge, then pointed to the door. 2 guards. He nodded, moved into position opposite the doorframe. She counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. She kicked the door open. The 2 guards were sitting at a small table, playing cards. They looked up, startled, hands reaching for weapons. But Reese was already moving, her good arm driving forward in a straight punch that caught the first guard square in the throat. He gagged, stumbled back. Stonebridge was on the second guard before the man could draw his pistol, using a joint lock that forced him face down onto the table, cards scattering. Stonebridge's M1911 pressed against the back of his head. No te muevas, Stonebridge said quietly. Don't move. The first guard was on his knees, clutching his throat, trying to breathe through his crushed trachea. Reese felt a flicker of guilt. She hadn't meant to hit him that hard, but her depth perception was off, with the shoulder injury throwing her balance. In the corner of the room, zip-tied to a chair, was Elwood Brennan. The old man's eyes went wide as he saw Reese. Recognition, disbelief, hope. You, he whispered, the girl from the cafe. We're getting you out of here, mister. Brennan, Reese said, moving to cut his bonds. Stay quiet and do exactly what I say. How did you? They said no one would come. We came. She freed his hands, helped him stand. He was shaking, exhausted, but unhurt. "Can you walk?" "I think so. They didn't hurt me much, just scared me." The guard Stonebridge was holding suddenly lurched, trying to throw him off. The colonel was ready, redirecting the movement and slamming the man's head into the table. He went limp. "We need to move," Stonebridge said. "They'll have heard the door." As if in answer, footsteps pounded above them, voices shouting in Spanish. The element of surprise was gone. Reese pulled Brennan toward the window. "Colonel, we're going out the way we came. Can you boost him up?" But before Stonebridge could answer, the basement door at the top of the stairs crashed open. 3 guards came down, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Reese pushed Brennan behind her, drew her Glock. "Get down!" The first guard fired. The shot went wide, punching into the concrete wall, inches from her head. She returned fire, 2 controlled shots, center mass. The guard went down. Stonebridge was already firing, his M1911 barking twice. Another guard dropped. The third guard dove back up the stairs, shouting for reinforcements. "Window, now!" Reese yelled. She grabbed Brennan, practically threw him at the opening. The old man scrambled through with surprising agility born of pure adrenaline. More footsteps above. More voices. The entire compound was awake now, mobilizing. Stonebridge went through the window next, turning to provide cover as Reese followed. Her shoulders screamed in protest as she pulled herself up and through, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. Information could be processed later. They were outside, in the narrow gap between the building and the fence. Dawn was starting to break, the sky turning from black to deep blue. Visibility improving. That worked against them. "Back to the fence," Stonebridge commanded, leading Brennan at a half-run. Reese covered their retreat, moving backward, weapon trained on the basement window. A guard appeared in the opening, started to climb through. She put a round into the window frame next to his head. He ducked back inside. They reached the fence, slipped through the cut section. Now they were outside the perimeter, but far from safe. The compound was lit up now, searchlights sweeping the grounds. An alarm blared, harsh and insistent. And then Reese heard it, the sound that made her blood run cold. A helicopter. She looked up, saw the running lights approaching from the south. Not police, not military, private. Volkov's escape route, probably, but it was coming in fast, vectoring toward their position. "They've got air support," she shouted over the alarm. Stonebridge saw it too. "Into the ravine, move!" They ran, Brennan between them, the old man gasping but keeping pace. Behind them, guards were pouring out of the compound, at least 8 of them, weapons firing. Rounds snapped through the air, kicking up dirt around their feet. The ravine was 50 meters away. 40. 30. Brennan stumbled. Reese caught him, her wounded shoulder protesting violently. She kept him upright, kept moving. 20 meters. The helicopter was overhead now, a spotlight blazing down, pinning them in white light. The downwash from the rotors kicked up a blinding cloud of dust. 10 meters. They tumbled into the ravine just as concentrated fire tore up the ground where they'd been standing. Reese landed hard on her injured shoulder, bit back a scream. Stonebridge rolled, came up firing back at the compound, providing suppression. "We can't stay here," he yelled. "They'll flank us in minutes." Reese knew he was right. The ravine provided cover, but also trapped them. They needed to move, needed to get to the vehicle parked 3 miles north. 3 miles. With an injured shoulder, an exhausted 76-year-old man, and at least 8 hostiles in pursuit. The math wasn't good. The helicopter was circling, the pilot trying to get an angle on them, but the ravine was just deep enough, just narrow enough, that he couldn't get a clear shot without risking the aircraft on the rocky walls. Small mercies. "Can you run?" Reese asked Brennan. The old man nodded, breathing hard. "For my life? Yes, I can run." "Then run, north, follow the ravine. Don't stop until you reach a Ford Explorer parked on the access road. Keys are under the driver's seat. You get there before us, you drive. You understand? What about you? We'll be right behind you. Go! Brennan went, stumbling at first, then finding his rhythm. The adrenaline was doing its work, giving his 76-year-old body a strength it hadn't had in decades. Reese and Stonebridge provided cover, firing controlled bursts at any guard who tried to approach the ravine edge. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage: the high ground's reverse slope. The guards had to expose themselves to fire down into the ravine, and every time they did, Reese or Stonebridge made them pay for it. But ammunition was finite. Reese had 2 magazines left, Stonebridge maybe 3. "We need to move," the colonel said, ejecting an empty magazine, slamming in a fresh one. "Cover me. I'll cover you. Leapfrog back." They moved like they'd trained together for years, each covering the other's movement, bounding back through the ravine in tactical retreat. It was textbook small unit tactics, the kind of thing drilled into every infantry soldier, but executed with the precision that only came from real combat experience. A guard appeared on the ravine edge, rifle up. Reese fired first. He dropped. Another appeared. Stonebridge's M1911 cracked twice. That one dropped too. But for every guard they dropped, it seemed like 2 more appeared. The helicopter pilot was getting bolder, dropping lower, trying to use the rotor wash to kick up enough dust to blind them. And then Reese heard a new sound that made her stomach drop. Engines, vehicles, coming up the access road from the south. Reinforcements, more of Volkov's people. They were about to be caught in a pincer. "Colonel," she said, her voice tight, "we've got company coming up our 6. Stonebridge risked a look back, swore quietly. 3 vehicles, looks like technicals, heavy weapons, trucks with mounted machine guns. That changed everything. The ravine wouldn't protect them from .50 caliber rounds. They needed a new plan. Fast. Reese scanned the terrain, her tactical mind racing through options. They were maybe 1.5 miles from their vehicle. Brennan was ahead of them, moving well, but vulnerable. The compound guards were behind and above them. The vehicles were coming up from behind, and the helicopter was still circling overhead like a buzzard, waiting for them to die. Then she saw it. A split in the ravine about 200 meters ahead. One branch continued north toward their vehicle. The other angled west, toward rougher terrain, rocky hills that vehicles couldn't navigate. A choice: safety or sacrifice. "Colonel," Reese said, "how good are you with that .45? "Better than I am with my knees. Why?" "Because I need you to do something crazy," she explained quickly. Stonebridge listened, his face grave. "That's not crazy," he finally said. "That's suicidal. You have a better idea?" "No, which is why I hate it." He checked his M1911, chambered around. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Stonebridge looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that took her breath away. Pride. The kind of pride a father might have for a daughter. "You remind me of her," he said quietly. "She would have made the same choice. Stupid. Brave. Right. I'm sorry you lost her. So am I. Every day." He gripped her good shoulder. "Don't make me lose you too, Kincaid. You get Brennan out. You survive. That's an order." "I don't take orders anymore, Colonel. I'm retired." "Then consider it a request from an old man who's seen too many good people die." The technicals were getting closer, maybe 3 minutes out. Reese nodded. "When I move, you cover me. Then you run. You get to Brennan, you get him to the vehicle, you drive to the border. Detective Briggs is waiting. He'll get you through. And you? I'll buy you the time you need, then I'll find another way out." "Reese." "Go, Colonel. That's my request. From someone who doesn't want to watch another good person die." Stonebridge wanted to argue. She could see it in his face. But he was also a soldier, and he recognized a necessary sacrifice when he saw one. "You better survive this," he said, "because if you don't, I'm going to be very disappointed." "I'll do my best." He ran, moving north through the ravine, his limp barely noticeable with adrenaline masking the pain. Reese watched him go for 3 seconds, making sure he had a good start. Then she turned west and ran the opposite direction. The guards saw the split immediately. Half followed Stonebridge, half followed Reese. Perfect. She ran hard, ignoring the fire in her shoulder, ignoring the exhaustion, ignoring everything except the need to draw them away. Behind her, she heard the technicals arrive at the ravine, heard shouting as they tried to figure out which way their targets had gone. She gave them a hint, stopped, turned, fired 3 shots back at the pursuing guards. They returned fire, and in the muzzle flashes she saw their faces. Young men, professionals, just doing a job. She didn't want to kill them, didn't want to add more faces to the gallery of ghosts that haunted her nights. But if it was them or Brennan, there was no choice at all. She turned and kept running. The western ravine narrowed, the walls getting steeper, rockier. Exactly what she needed. The guards were fit and fast, but Reese had done hill training that would make a mountain goat weep. She knew how to move on broken terrain. She led them deeper, farther from the compound, farther from Stonebridge and Brennan. 5 guards following her now. Maybe 6. She didn't have time to count. The ravine ended abruptly at a rock face. A dead end. Reese smiled. Not a dead end. A kill box. She scrambled up the rock face, using handholds that were barely there, her injured shoulder screaming. But she'd done worse in training. SEAL selection included climbing that made this look like a playground jungle gym. 20 feet up there was a ledge, narrow, but enough. She pulled herself up, rolled onto it, took position. The guards arrived at the base of the rock face 30 seconds later. They looked up, saw her silhouetted against the lightning sky, raised their weapons. "I wouldn't," Reese called down in Spanish. "You're in a natural funnel. I have high ground and cover. You have neither. First one who fires, I drop. Then the second. Then the third. By the time you get me, half of you are dead. Is that a trade you want to make?" The guards hesitated. They were professionals, not fanatics. They understood tactical math. "Your boss sent you to kill an old man and a woman," Reese continued. "Is that worth dying for? Is Volkov paying you enough to take a bullet?" One of the guards lowered his weapon slightly. The others glanced at him. "I don't want to kill you," Reese said, and she meant it. "I've killed enough people. I'm tired of it. But I will if you make me. Or you can let me walk away. Tell Volkov I got away. Tell him the Americans were too much. Tell him whatever you want. But let this go." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then one of the guards said something in rapid Spanish to the others. An argument broke out, voices raised, gestures, and then slowly they lowered their weapons. The one who'd spoken first looked up at Reese. "You go, but Volkov will find you. He always finds them. Tell Volkov if he comes for me again, I won't be so merciful." The guards backed away, disappeared back down the ravine. Reese stayed on the ledge for another 5 minutes, making sure they were really gone. Then she climbed down, her shoulder barely functional now, moving on pure will. She was alone, in hostile territory, at least 3 miles from the border. No vehicle, no backup, injured, but Brennan was safe. Stonebridge would get him out. That was what mattered. She started walking north, using the sun to navigate. The terrain was brutal, all rocks and scrub, but she'd trained in worse. Afghanistan, Iraq, the mountains of wherever they'd sent SEALs to do the impossible. This was just one more impossible thing. 3 hours later, covered in dust and dried blood, shoulder barely mobile, Reese stumbled onto a paved road. A truck passed, didn't stop. Then another. The third one stopped. An old farmer, weathered face, kind eyes. He said something in Spanish. Reese's Spanish was functional at best, but she understood the tone. He was offering help. She climbed into the truck bed. He drove north. At the border crossing, she showed her fake ID. The guard barely looked at her. Just another dusty American tourist coming back from a rough night in Tijuana. On the U.S. side, a Crown Victoria was waiting. Detective Briggs leaned against it, talking to Colonel Stonebridge. And sitting in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, was Elwood Brennan. They all looked up as Reese approached. Brennan's eyes filled with tears. Stonebridge's face split into a rare, genuine smile. Briggs just shook his head. "You look like hell, Kincaid," the detective said. "Feel worse," she replied. "Brennan's safe, thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Reese corrected, looking at Stonebridge. "Couldn't have done it alone." "No," the colonel agreed. "You couldn't have. But you did the hard part. Drawing them off. That was all you." Brennan struggled out of the car, walked to Reese on unsteady legs. He grabbed her good hand in both of his. "Young lady," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you saved my life. Twice now. I don't have words for what that means." "You don't need words, sir. Just stay alive. That's all the thanks I need." "I will. I promise you. I will." He looked at Stonebridge, then Briggs, then back to Reese. "All of you. You risk everything for an old man you barely knew. Why?" Reese thought about the 16-year-old boy in Afghanistan, thought about her 14 months of PTSD, of trying to forget, of trying to be normal. "Because it was right," she said simply, "and because I needed to prove to myself that I could still do the right thing." Briggs cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, about the EMP device Volkov was after." Brennan shook his head, a tired smile on his face. "There is no device, detective. I destroyed the prototype 6 months ago when I suspected someone was surveilling me. The equations, the blueprints, everything. Volkov was chasing a ghost." He looked at Reese. "I couldn't let that technology fall into the wrong hands, even if it meant making myself a target." "So all of this," Stonebridge said quietly, "was for nothing." "Not nothing," Brennan corrected. "It revealed who these people were, and it brought good people together." He squeezed Reese's hand. "That's not nothing." Briggs pulled out his phone, showed them a message. "FB, I picked up Lucian's testimony. Joint operation with Mexican Federal Police hit Volkov's compound at 0800. Volkov arrested on site. 12 guards in custody, weapons cache seized. He's being extradited to the U.S. They're sending him to ADX Florence. By sunset, his entire operation is done." "And us?" Reese asked. "What happens to us?" "Officially, you were never in Mexico. You were consulting with me on the Brennan kidnapping case. Everything that happened south of the border was handled by federal agencies. You're clean." "That easy?" "When an old man's life is saved and a major arms dealer is taken down? Yeah, that easy. Government likes its heroes, Kincaid, even the unofficial ones." Reese nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Come on," Briggs said. "Let's get you to a hospital. That shoulder needs proper treatment. And then? And then you figure out what comes next. But Kincaid, whatever you decide, you did good. Real good." 3 weeks later, Reese stood in front of a small storefront in downtown San Diego. The sign above the door read, "Second Chances Defense Academy," in clean, professional lettering. Inside, 30 people filled the space. Women, elderly veterans, young adults, all learning how to protect themselves. Colonel Stonebridge stood at the front, demonstrating a basic wrist lock, his movements slow and precise for the students to follow. In the corner, helping a woman twice his age with her stance, were Lucian Cross, Boone Maddox, and Wyatt Maddox. They'd all been given probation and community service, and they'd asked if they could serve it here, teaching the people who needed it most. Wyatt was scheduled to teach the youth class later. Boone was helping Stonebridge with the veterans program. Reese watched through the window, feeling something she hadn't felt in 14 months. Not quite peace, not quite purpose, but close. The door opened. Elwood Brennan stepped out carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd taken to visiting the academy every day, bringing coffee, telling stories, becoming a sort of grandfather figure to the students. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her a cup. Thank you, Elwood. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the class through the window. You know, Elwood said quietly, my wife used to tell me that the best lives aren't the ones without mistakes. They're the ones where people learn from mistakes and try to do better. She sounds like she was wise. She was, and stubborn, and kind. I miss her every day. He looked at Reese. But I think she'd be proud of what you built here, proud of what you're doing. I'm just teaching self-defense. No, you're teaching people they're worth protecting, that they have power, that they don't have to be victims. Elwood's eyes were bright. That's a gift, Reese. Don't underestimate it. Inside, Stonebridge caught sight of them through the window, nodded. Reese nodded back. Her phone buzzed, a text from Detective Briggs. Volkov transferred to ADX Florence this morning. FBI press conference at 2 p.m. They want to thank you publicly. You in? Reese typed back. No thanks, I'm busy teaching. She put the phone away. Everything okay? Elwood asked. Yeah, Reese said, and for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Everything's okay. The sun was setting over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Inside the academy, students practiced their moves, learning to protect themselves, learning they were stronger than they knew. And in the doorway, a former Navy SEAL who'd spent 6 years learning to be a weapon finally found a way to be something else. Not a warrior, not a civilian, something in between, a protector, a teacher, a person who'd seen the worst of humanity and chosen to believe in the best. Reese Kincaid had spent 14 months running from who she was. Now she was running toward who she could become. And that made all the difference. She finished her coffee, stepped inside, and joined the class. Stonebridge moved aside, giving her the floor. The students watched with attentive eyes as she demonstrated a defensive move. Simple, effective, something anyone could learn. The key, she told them, isn't to be the strongest, it's to be prepared, to be aware, to trust yourself. A young woman raised her hand. What if we freeze? What if we're too scared? Reese thought about the cafe, about the compound, about every firefight she'd ever been in. Fear is natural, she said. I've been afraid more times than I can count. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing to try. The class murmured agreement. As the lesson continued, Reese caught Lucian's eye. The kid smiled, grateful, hopeful. She smiled back. They'd all been given second chances. Lucian, Boone, and Wyatt trying to make amends. Stonebridge finding purpose after loss. Brennan getting more time with his memories. And Reese learning that being a warrior didn't mean living in war. It meant protecting peace. The class ended at 7. Students filed out thanking her, thanking Stonebridge, promising to practice. Brennan lingered, helping clean up, reluctant to leave the warmth and community he'd found here. Finally, only Reese and Stonebridge remained. Good class, the colonel said. Thanks to you. Shared credit. We make a good team. Yeah, Reese agreed. We do. Stonebridge pulled out his phone, showed her a message. FBI wants us to consult on another case. Kidnapping in Oregon. Professional crew. They think our expertise could help. You interested? Only if you are. You're the operator, I'm just the advisor. Reese considered. She could say no, could focus on the academy, on teaching, on building a peaceful life. But she thought about the victims in Oregon, about people who needed help, who were waiting for someone to care enough to try. Tell them we'll look at it, she said. No promises, but we'll look. Stonebridge grinned. Thought you might say that. They locked up the academy, stepped out into the San Diego night. The city hummed around them, millions of people living their lives, most never knowing how close they'd come to disaster. How many people worked in the shadows to keep them safe? That was fine. Reese didn't need recognition, didn't need headlines or medals or thanks. She just needed to know she was doing the right thing. And for the first time in 14 months, she did. They walked to their cars, parting with a simple nod. No dramatic goodbyes, just two operators acknowledging each other, ready for whatever came next. Reese drove home to her apartment, still sparse, still minimalist, but with a few new additions. Photos from the academy, a thank you card from Brennan, a note from Lucian that simply said, "Because of you, I'm trying." She set her keys on the counter, noticed her reflection in the window. The woman looking back was still a warrior, still carried scars, inside and out. But she was also more. A teacher, a protector, a person learning to live with her past while building a future. She thought about the cafe, about 15 seconds that changed everything. They'd taken her for an easy mark. They'd been wrong. She smiled, turned from the window, and went to bed. Tomorrow, there would be students to train, maybe a case in Oregon to consider. But tonight, the warrior could rest. The peace was worth fighting for.